Good morning, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Monday morning. I am here to do your read aloud. Remember that when we left off, Snape had just given Ron a detention of cleaning out bedpans in the hospital wing. Blech, no magic used, which means you know, you know what bedpans in the hospital wing are used for. Like, yikes. Um, yeah, I'm trying to be really positive about us not being back in school and this whole quarantine. I'm trying to take that uplifting approach and be a role model and really be a positive guy about it. So I'm working on it. With that being said, I've got my lights down low and my hat on because, not because I'm sweaty, but because my hair needs a haircut really bad. I'm looking really shaggy, and I don't know how that's going to happen with all these businesses closed. So I'm going to work on that. I may buzz my head. We'll see. I hope that you guys had a great weekend and that things are going well. I'm going to start up, and remember they're going to do the Quidditch match against Hufflepuff, not against Slytherin. Harry woke extremely early next morning, so early that it was still dark out. For a moment, he thought the roaring of the wind had woken him. Then he felt a cold breeze on the back of his neck and sat bolt upright. Peeves, the poltergeist, had been floating next to him, blowing hard in his ear. "What did you do that for?" said Harry furiously. Peeves puffed out his cheeks, blew hard, and zoomed backwards out of the room, cackling, which means like laughing in a really ridiculous way. Harry fumbled for his alarm clock and looked at it. It was 4:30. Cursing Peeves, he rolled over and tried to get back to sleep, but it was very difficult, now he was awake, to ignore the sounds of the thunder rumbling overhead. The pounding of the wind against the castle walls, and the distant creaking of the trees in the forbidden forest. In a few hours, he would be out on the Quidditch pitch, battling through that gale. Finally, he gave up any thought of more sleep, got up, dressed, picked up his Nimbus 2000, and walked quietly out of the dormitory. As Harry opened the door, something brushed against his legs. He bent down just in time to grab Crookshanks by the end of his bushy tail and drag him outside of the room. Dang, that Crookshanks was trying to get in his dormitory. Sneaky cat. As Harry opened the door, something brushed against his leg. I just read that. I reckon Ron was right about you," Harry told Crookshanks suspiciously. "There are plenty of mice around this castle. Go and chase them. Go on," he added, nudging Crookshanks down the spiral staircase with his foot. "Leave Scabbers alone." The noise of the storms was even louder in the common room. Harry knew better than to think the match would be cancelled. Quidditch matches were never called off for such little things such as thunderstorms. Nevertheless, he was starting to feel very apprehensive, nervous or leery about it. Oliver Wood had pointed out Cedric Diggory to him in the hallway. Cedric was a fifth-year boy and a lot bigger than Harry. Seekers were he's the seeker for the Hufflepuff team, if you guys forgot. Cedric Diggory is the seeker, so he plays the same position as Harry, but he's on the Hufflepuff team. Okay. Seekers were usually light and speedy, but Diggory's weight would be an advantage in this weather because he was less likely to be blown off course. Think about it, like if you're up in the air and then the wind blows, Harry's light, he's going to get... Cedric Diggory's like big and bulky, like probably not quite as big and bulky as me, but broader like I am, and so the wind's not going to push him around quite as easily. No, that's right. Harry hung around until dawn in front of the fire, getting up every now and then to stop Crookshanks from sneaking up the boys' staircase again. At long last, Harry thought it must be time for breakfast, so he headed through the portrait hole alone. "Stand and fight, you mangy mutt!" yelled Sir Cadogan. Remember, that's the guy who took over the portrait for the fat lady. "Oh, shut up," Harry yawned. He revived a little bit over a bowl of porridge, and by the time he had started on the toast, the rest of the team had showed up to the table. "It's going to be a tough one," said Wood, who wasn't eating anything. "Stop worrying, Oliver," said Alicia soothingly. "We don't mind a bit of rain. We're fine." But it was considerably more than just a little bit of rain. Such was the popularity of Quidditch that the whole school, so basically, Quidditch was so popular that the whole school turned out to watch the match as usual, but they ran down the lawns toward the Quidditch pitch, heads bowed against the fierce winds, umbrellas being whipped out of their hands as they went. Just before he entered the changing room, Harry saw Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle laughing and pointing at him from under an enormous umbrella on their way to the stadium. The team changed into their scarlet robes and waited for Oliver Wood's usual pre-match pep talk, but it didn't come. He tried to speak several times, made an odd gulping noise, and then shook his head hopelessly and beckoned them to follow him out on the pitch. The wind was so strong that they staggered sideways as they walked out onto the field. If the crowd was cheering, they couldn't hear it over the fresh rolls of thunder. Rain was splattering over Harry's glasses. How on earth was he going to see the snitch in this? The Hufflepuffs were approaching from the opposite side of the pitch, wearing canary yellow robes. The captains walked up to each other and shook hands. Diggory smiled at Wood, but Wood now looked as though he had lockjaw, which is like a jaw stuck because he's so nervous, and merely nodded. Harry saw Madam Hooch's mouth form the words, "Mount your brooms." He pulled his right foot out of the mud with a squelch and swung it up over his Nimbus 2000. Madam Hooch put her whistle up to her lips and gave a blast that sounded shrill and distant. They were off. Okay, pause. I want to talk for a minute about the word choice in this book. J.K. Rowling, the author, is using excellent word choice as she goes through here. She's being really descriptive, and she's not using just basic words like, it was cold, it was rainy, she's like being really descriptive. One of my favorite things is that, he pulled his right foot out of the mud with a squelch. You know, like when you walk in like muddy ground and it makes that sound? J.K. Rowling described that, and it was a way to let us know that like the pitch was waterlogged and like so full of water that he couldn't even like walk normally in that squelch sound. I just think that's really cool and something to think about when you're doing your writing, whether it's narrative, persuasive, or informational. So just a thought. You can use word choice in everywhere. And they were off. Harry rose fast, but his Nimbus was swerving slightly with the wind. He held it as steadily as he could and turned, squinting into the rain. Within 5 minutes, Harry was soaked to the skin and frozen, hardly able to see his teammates, let alone the tiny snitch. He flew backwards and forwards across the pitch, past blurred red and yellow shapes. The red, obviously, are the Gryffindor. The yellow are obviously the Hufflepuff. With no idea of what was happening in the rest of the game, he couldn't hear the commentary over the wind. That's the guy who talks on the microphone. The crowd was hidden beneath a sea of cloaks and battered umbrellas. Twice, Harry came very close to being unseated by a bludger. His vision was so clouded by the rain on his glasses, he hadn't seen them coming. He lost track of time. It was getting harder and harder to hold his broom straight. The sky was getting darker, as though the night had decided to come early. Twice, Harry had nearly hit another player without knowing whether it was a teammate or the opponent. Everyone was now so wet, and the rain so thick he could hardly tell them apart. With the first flash of lightning came the sound of Madam Hooch's whistle. Harry could see the outline of Wood through the thick rain, gesturing him towards the ground. The whole team splashed down into the mud. "I called for a timeout," Wood roared at his team. "Come on, under here." They huddled under the edge of the pitch, under a large umbrella. Harry took off his glasses and wiped them hurriedly on his robes. "What's the score?" "We're 50 points up," said Wood, "but unless we get the snitch soon, we'll be playing all night." "I've got no chance with these glasses on," Harry said waving his glasses. At that very moment, Hermione appeared at his shoulder. She had run down. She was holding her cloak over her head and was inexplicably beaming. "I've had an idea," beaming, like really happy. "I've had an idea, Harry. Give me your glasses, quick." He handed them to her, and as the team watched in amazement, Hermione tapped them with her wand and said, "Impervious." "There," she said, handing them back to Harry. "They'll repel water." Wood looked as though he could have kissed Hermione. He was so happy. "Brilliant," he called hoarsely after her as she disappeared into the crowd. "Okay, team, let's go for it." Hermione's spell had done the trick. Harry was still numb with cold, still wetter than he'd ever been in his life, but he could see. Full of fresh determination, he urged his broom through the turbulent air, so the wavy air, staring in every direction for the snitch, avoiding a bludger, ducking beneath Diggory, who was streaking in the opposite direction. There was another clap of thunder, followed by an immediate forked lightning. This was getting more and more dangerous. Harry needed to get that snitch quickly. He turned, intending to head back towards the middle of the pitch, but at that moment, another flash of lightning illuminated the stands, and Harry saw something that distracted him completely. The silhouette of an enormous, shaggy, black dog, clearly imprinted against the sky. Do you guys remember what the shaggy black dog is an omen of? Remember Professor Trelawney's class? The Grim, the omen of death? The silhouette of an enormous, shaggy black dog, clearly imprinted against the sky. Motionless in the topmost empty row of seats, Harry's numb hand slipped on the broom handle and his nimbus dropped a few feet. Shaking his sodden fringe out of his eyes, he squinted back into the stands. The dog had vanished. "Harry!" came Wood's anguished yell to the Gryffindor post. "Harry, behind you!" Harry looked wildly around. Cedric Diggory was pelting up the pitch, and a tiny speck of gold was shimmering in the rain-filled air between them. With a jolt of panic, Harry threw himself flat on his broom and zoomed towards the snitch. "Come on!" he growled at his nimbus as the rain whipped against his face. "Faster!" But something odd was happening. An eerie silence was falling across the stadium. The wind, though as strong as ever, was forgetting to roar. It was as though someone had turned off the sound, as though Harry had gone suddenly deaf. What's going on? And then a horribly familiar wave of cold swept over him, inside him, just as he became aware of something moving on the Quidditch pitch below. Before he'd had time to think, Harry had taken his eyes off the snitch and looked down. At least 100 Dementors, their hidden faces pointing up at him, were standing below. It was as though freezing water was rising in his chest, cutting at his insides, and then he heard it again. Someone screaming inside his head. A woman. "Not Harry! Please, not Harry! Stand aside, you silly girl. Stand aside now! Not Harry! Please, no! Take me! Kill me instead!" Nothing. Swirling white mist was filling Harry's brain. What was he doing? Why was he flying? He needed to help her. She was going to die. She was going to be murdered. He was falling through the icy mist. "Not Harry! Please! Have mercy! Have mercy!" A shrill voice was laughing. The woman was screaming, and Harry knew no more. Luckily, the ground was soft. I thought he was dead for sure. But he didn't even break his glasses. Harry could hear voices whispering, but they made no sense whatsoever. He didn't have a clue where he was, or how he'd gotten there, or what he'd been doing before he got there. All he knew was that every inch of him was aching as though he had been beaten. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. The scariest thing. Hooded black figures, cold, screaming. Harry's eyes snapped open. He was lying in the hospital wing. The Gryffindor Quidditch team, splattered with mud from head to foot, gathered around his bed. Ron and Hermione were also there, looking as though they had just climbed out of a swimming pool. "Harry," said Fred, who looked extremely white underneath the mud. "How are you feeling?" It was as though Harry's memory was on fast forward. The lightning, the Grim in the sky, the snitch, and then the Dementors. "What happened?" he said, sitting up so suddenly they all gasped. You fell off," said Fred. "Must have been, 50 feet in the air." Hermione made a small squeaking noise. Her eyes were extremely bloodshot. "But the match," said Harry. "What happened? Are we having a redo?" No one said anything. The horrible truth sank into Harry like a stone. "We didn't lose." "Cedric Diggory got the snitch," said George. "Just after you fell. He didn't realize what had happened. He looked back and saw you on the ground. He tried to call it off. He actually wanted a rematch, but they won fair and square. Even Oliver Wood admits it." "Where is Oliver?" said Harry, suddenly realizing he wasn't there. "He's still in the shower," said Fred. We think he's trying to drown himself. Harry put his face to his knees, his hands gripping his hair. Fred grabbed his shoulder and shook it roughly. Come on, Harry. You've never missed the snitch before. It's your first time. There had to be one time you didn't get it, said George. There had to be one time you didn't get it, said George. It's not over yet, said Fred. We lost by 100 points, right? So if Hufflepuff loses to Ravenclaw and we beat Ravenclaw and Slytherin, Hufflepuff will have to lose by at least 200 points, said George. But if they beat Ravenclaw, no way, Ravenclaw are too good. But if Slytherin loses against Hufflepuff, it all depends on points. A margin of 100 either way. Harry lay there, not saying a word. They had lost. For the first time ever, he had lost a Quidditch match. We all know it's awful to lose. But like I always say, not everybody's a winner, you know? Things happen. This is a perfect example. Okay, I'll stop interrupting. After 10 minutes or so, Madame Pomfrey came over to tell the team to leave him in peace. We'll come and see you later, Fred told him. Don't beat yourself up, Harry. You're still the best seeker we've ever had. The team trooped out, trailing mud behind them. Madame Pomfrey shut the door behind them, looking disapprovingly. Ron and Hermione moved nearer to Harry's bed. Dumbledore was really angry, Hermione said in a quaking voice. I've never seen him like that before. He ran onto the pitch as you fell, waved his wand, and he sort of slowed down before you hit the ground. Then he whirled his wand at the Dementors, shot silver stuff at them. They left the stadium straight away. He was furious that they even came onto the grounds. We heard him. Then he magicked you up into a stretcher, said Ron, and walked up to the school with you floating on it. Everyone thought you were, well, his voice faded away, but Harry hardly noticed. He was thinking about what the Dementors had done to him, about the screaming voice. He looked up and saw Ron and Hermione looking at him so anxiously that he quickly cast around for something matter-of-fact to say. Did someone get my Nimbus? His Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione looked quickly at each other. What? Said Harry, looking from one to the other. Well, when you fell off, it got blown away, said Hermione hesitantly. And it hit... Well, Harry, the thing is, it hit the Whomping Willow. Harry's inside lurched. The Whomping Willow was a very violent tree which stood alone in the middle of the grounds. And, said Harry, dreading the answer, well, you know the Whomping Willow, said Ron. It doesn't like being hit. Professor Flitwick brought it back just before you came around, like before you woke up, said Hermione in a very small voice. Slowly, she reached down for a bag at her feet, turned it upside down, and tipped over a dozen bits of splintered wood and twigs onto the bed. The only remains of Harry's faithful, finally beaten broomstick. And that's the end of the chapter. Next is chapter 10, The Marauder's Map, which is a pretty fun chapter. And that's good because it's following a pretty not fun chapter. This video lasted way longer than I expected to, but I wanted to finish that up for you. Please have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, I totally forgot. The vet came. We did do llama dentist work, but I cannot figure out how to put it in clips for you. I'm going to try and do that this afternoon. I just briefly tried this morning, and it didn't work out so well. So I'm going to try again this afternoon. I'm going to look for an editing program on this computer. I'm sure there's one in here. Hopefully I can figure it out. I wish you guys were here because you could figure it out a lot faster than me. The llama has not yet had her baby. I just feel like she's not going to anymore because I have promised, I've talked about it so much, so she's trying to prove me wrong. This llama that's supposed to have the baby does hate me a lot, so, I can only do what I can do. All right, have a great afternoon. I hope that you guys get to go outside before it gets too rainy and nasty. I have a lot of meetings today with teachers, so maybe I'll get some updates on what our next couple weeks are going to look like as far as instruction, and I will let you know tomorrow with tomorrow morning's video. Thanks. Bye.